Well, good morning. It's Friday morning at 9 o'clock, and it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from Tridec, and we've got a great guest for us today. I'd like to introduce Brad Sawatzke, who's the CEO of Energy Northwest. Good morning, Brad.
Morning, Karl. How are you doing today?
Really well. Thanks a lot for joining us. I know you've been really busy, had a lot of stuff on your plate, so we appreciate you taking an hour to talk to us this morning.
No, well, thank you. I'm excited to talk about some of the new things today going on and that with you, so I'll get a chance to share with you. Yeah.
No, it's perfect timing. It is Nuclear Science Week, so I
Yes,
think that's
yes,
a
it
great
is.
tie into some of the things we'll talk about today. But in Coffee with Karl, we always talk about our mug or our coffee, so I'll kick it off this morning. I got this kind of cool, earthy, crafty kind of mug that I got. I actually went to a training session at an investor-owned utility in Eastern Washington last year, and as you know, they gave me the mug as part of the training. But I sure learned a lot about the utility system, about utilities in general. And I know that's a little bit about what we talk about today. So I figured that was a good mug to drink out of.
Well, that actually is quite a coincidence, Karl. You're going to like this. So I'm normally a guy who grabs the first mug, what's ever in the cupboard, right? Available. I don't have a special mug, but since I knew this is something we discussed, kind of dug to the back of the cupboard. And the one I found was actually, this one is from my days when I worked at Monticello Nuclear Plant, and this is a Red Wing pottery. This one's, and the other reason is, so it was where I started my career at Monticello, and it's actually during my time in training at Monticello. So it's a Monticello training mug, made from Red Wing pottery, also in Minnesota. Actually, we're down at Red Wing is Prairie Island plant, where I did actually work for about 18 months before coming out here. And so this is like a 30-year mug now, 30-year-old mug. And then I also got it because on this side here, it says bringing out the best in people relative to what we do in training. In our industry, as you know, we invest a lot of resources, if you will, in the training our people and qualifying our people and making sure they're prepared to do their job. So anyhow, I went back, dug in the cupboard, and I thought that was a very appropriate one. So we both kind of got that earthen mug today, and with the training background to it. So excellent. We're off to a good start, Karl.
We're off to a good start, Brad. Well, you talked about the plant in Minnesota. Are you originally a Minnesota native, Brad? Or
Yes, I am. Yeah, my wife and I, my wife Kim and I, we're both from Monticello, Minnesota. It's a small town in Minnesota. It was a small town at the time we grew up, about a couple thousand people. It's probably like 15,000 today. The nuclear plant came in when I was probably like in junior high and opened up. And it wasn't like my intent was I'm going to go work there as I get older. It just happened to turn out that way. And ended up working there. And my wife Kim actually worked there for a while before being a full-time mom. And so, yeah, we spent 50 years of our life there before coming to Washington State 10 years ago now. So we moved out here 10 years ago. The kids were essentially grown and on to college or off on their own. And we thought, hey, what a great opportunity and to get to see a new part of the country and do something different. So yeah, and we're going to come out for a couple of years, Karl. And next thing I know, it's been 10 now. So yeah.
No, that's great, Brad. Because, since of course we're newcomers to the Tri-Cities too. And that's what everybody says is that, you talk to so many people and they're like, oh, we'll come out for a couple of years. And then they spend the rest of their lives here. So we're looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah. Beautiful area. That's for sure. So much to offer. So much.
It really does. So based on that, I just want to ask you a quick question. And that is, so growing up and being from Monticello, and then, there's this new nuclear plant, like you said, when you're in junior high, like being in that environment where you had that power producer locally, was that part of how you kind of like figured out when you're in junior high and high school, what you wanted to maybe major in? And like, was that an influence? And I'm talking about because, STEM education and certification education for our local, kids that are in school now, how can we build those bridges? And do you have a story that worked for you that maybe we could think about how can we make that happen more times?
Well, first of all, we're big believers here at Energy Northwest in the STEM piece. We normally do, unfortunately with the COVID, it's changed things for all of us over the last several months because we're normally involved in programs with elementary students and that trying to advance the STEM piece of it. So we're big believers in that. However, I can't sit here and tell you that I gave it that much pre-thought myself personally, Karl. I stumbled into it, quite honestly. I was going to college at a state university not far from Monticello, and in between I was trying to come up with ways to make money to pay for college. And as it turned out, my wife's father-in-law, my wife's dad, my father-in-law was a construction laborer. During outages, they'd hire people to do work. So he helped me get a card so I could do some work to make money to go back to school. And well, I got seconded to the maintenance shop doing janitor work, and the maintenance manager liked me and basically offered if I wanted to come in-house. So, and what I did know from growing up in Monticello, though, about the plant was that everybody who worked there seemed to be doing just fine in life compared to those of us who grew up in the small rural town. They came in and everything seemed to be okay. So you always knew that, and it was like, well, why not take advantage of that? And frankly, I will say the good news is I loved what I was doing right away as I got a chance to get into operating and different things. And then I finished my degree at night later on in my 30s. So I went back to school and finished it at night school. So, and then I did gear it towards what I was doing, a physics degree for plant operations.
Oh, that's great. Well, for anybody just joining us, we have Brad Sawatzke, the CEO of Energy Northwest. If anybody on Zoom wants to ask a question, we'll use the question and answer box at the bottom. And if you're on Facebook live on the live stream, you can put your questions in the comment sections and we'll get to as many questions as we can. Well, Brad, I told you before, I had the advantage of watching you yesterday when Energy Northwest hosted your public power forum, and you did it all online. And I think it was really, really great. But, you know, I got a whole list of notes based on what you talked about yesterday. So you want to kick us off with maybe just some background and who is Energy Northwest and what's your role, you know, within I guess the energy grid really, and some of the other things you do.
Sure. So Energy Northwest is what's known as a joint action agency. All right. And really it started in 1957 through legislation in the state of Washington, which allowed public utility districts or cities to kind of come together to work on projects, right? So maybe as a small public utility district, you couldn't generate enough funds to do a project on your own, like a hydro plant or generating, but working together, you're able to make that happen. So the Joint Action Agency was formed in 1957. Their first project was actually hydro plant, Packwood Hydro Plant, and that's about 25 megawatt hydro plant that we own and operate. So that was the first project. Then through the years, built Nine Canyon Wind Farm, almost 100 megawatt wind farm that sits out on ridges outside Kennewick. You can see that located out there. And of course, the biggest project they undertook back then was Washington Public Power Supply was they were going to be building 5 new nuclear plants. And if you go back to that time in the 70s, there was a lot of thought that demand for electricity was going to skyrocket quickly out here in the Northwest. The solution they came to was working with Bonneville Power, was building 5 new nuclear plants. Of course, anyone who knows their history here knows that in the end, only one got finished, and that's Columbia Generating Station. That's our largest producer. It's a 1,200 megawatt electric boiling water reactor nuclear plant. But since then, we've done a lot of other things too to expand. So the thing I'm proudest of, Karl, what I talked about yesterday is that we are a carbon-free generating company. Okay, generate electricity, and we do it carbon-free. Now, I'm a firm believer, and I think a lot of us are, although I know it's not maybe 100% behind this, but I'm a firm believer in the science behind what's going on with the environment, what's going on with the climate. I'm personally very passionate about it because I think for my children, our grandchildren, my grandchildren, we owe them a solution for this to address these problems. So from that perspective, as I say, I'm very fortunate. I get to go to work every day and I don't have to hang my morals at the door because I work for a company with a carbon-free footprint. So our company currently actually operates and maintains 5 hydro plants. I'm very proud of that. As I mentioned, we always had Packwood, which we built and owned from the 50s, but we've added 4 other ones in the last 5 years, basically. The city of Portland, we operate and maintain a hydro plant for them. For Tieton, which is located near Packwood in the Cascades, and actually owned by California, by Burbank, but we operate and maintain it for them. And we've just recently taken over a small hydro plant in Oregon and another one in Idaho. So we're expanding in the Northwest, and we're looking to continue to look for opportunities there. We've also, if you heard me talk, we're getting close to finishing a solar project here, working with the city of Richland. It's a project that many people are involved in. Frankly, it's a 4 megawatt solar project. The solar piece is run by 2C's, the name of the company. It's also a partnership with the IBEW, with the local IBEW 77, local 77, that they want to use for a training facility. And then partner with PNNL because there's battery storage, 1 megawatt battery storage also as part of that. And then the city of Richland's our other partner because they're doing the offtake on that. So we'll be operating and maintaining the battery. We're very excited about that because certainly renewables are going to play a large role in the future given the new legislation. And also as part of that, certainly storage becomes more and more important as part of it. So we want to have our fingers in what's going on with the new technology and storage. And fortunately, having someone like PNNL here in town, we're very lucky to be so closely partnered, you know, with such an incredible organization. So we're excited about that. So we got 5 hydro plants. We've got that solar storage going. We've got the 100 megawatts wind farm. So we're big believers in renewables, Karl. But at the heart of this is, right now, you need base load somewhere in there when the renewables, when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. The science of storage is such yet that we've got a lot of work to do before it becomes something you can depend on. I'll give you an example, Karl, that the battery storage system that we're putting in as part of this right now, which is, you know, up to date, newest technology, is able to feed 180 homes for 4 hours. All right, so you start trying to scale that, and to give you an idea, if you line up about 4 pickup trucks in a row, that's about how big that battery is. You think about trying to scale that for the city of Seattle, and frankly, it's impossible. So somewhere you need that base load, and that's where Columbia Generating Station comes in, carbon-free. The legislation that's passed recognizes all carbon-free generation regardless of the technology. So Columbia Generating Station at 1,200 megawatts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year becomes extremely important for anchoring that. So, and then, you know, whenever you want to talk about it, we've got the future coming now we're excited about, but that's kind of where we are today as a company right now today.
No, that's perfect. And, you know, Brad, maybe a couple things I'll ask another couple questions on. One, the legislation you talked about, the CETA standard for the state of Washington, because we'll come back to that when we're talking about your other announcement. But then I know within the last, I'd say, year or 2 years, and you've talked about this before, like at our board meetings, but Energy Northwest did a study looking at renewables and the cost if you wanted to go to all carbon-free generation only using renewables and look at some of those costs. And I think that you want to talk about that a little bit, because I think that's really part of what you just explained to us as far as needing that base load.
Yeah, so we did a study with a company known as E3 to take a look at what does the new legislation mean, right? And as people I'm sure are aware, eventually the bottom line is this: the new legislation says carbon-free by 2045, all right? What that's going to look like, how do we get there? Frankly, there's teams the governor has working on it right now to help try to flesh that out a little bit. But the way the legislation reads, carbon-free by 2045. So as we think about what that means, studies show anywhere from a potential 5 to 8 gigawatt delta of electricity as you retire all these carbon generation sources over the next 25 years. So where's that going to come from? Well, if you're of the belief that it should be all renewables, first of all, I will tell you again, my belief is the science doesn't support that right now. But the only way you could get close to potentially making that happen is having to overbuild so much, right? Because if you take a look, for example, in the Northwest here, wind is available about 30% of the time, solar another 35, somewhere between 25 to 35% of the time availability. You know, when I talk to people about wind as an example, Karl, as I say, we're owners in it, we're believers in it, we're looking for more opportunity to maintain and operate it. But having said that, the 3 worst producing months every single year for our wind farm are July, August, and January. The 2 hottest and coldest months of the year, it's just nature, are when the wind doesn't blow. And that's when they have their least availability. During those times when it's the hottest and the coldest, my wind farm is at its poorest production just because there's no wind. That's just the way it is. So the theory behind the study is if you were to overbuild, so you can equate that to saying I need to build 3 times as many renewables as I need because they're only available a third of the time. And by the way, I got to build them all over the Northwest. So if the wind's not blowing in this spot, there's a place where it is blowing. And when you start looking at the cost of what it would take to make that happen, and frankly, I don't even believe it would be feasible, but in theory, on a sheet of paper, what would it take to make that happen? When you start considering the transmission, they have to transport that from building it all over, all those things, it becomes extremely expensive. And at that point, the cost of nuclear becomes very, very competitive when you look to the future, because you can site it where you need it, you can site it where you need it. And again, the predictability, the 24/7 piece of it. So our study tells us very clearly that new nuclear is economically viable to address the challenges we're going to have in gaps to generation as we retire these carbon resources. And that was before, by the way, that was before we actually had the events of last week, which if you'd like me to talk a little bit about what went on there, okay?
Well, that's our next topic for sure.
Great. So that was before we got into the potential funding from the DOE. So what we're really excited about in the last couple of weeks, if you will, for Energy Northwest, and by the way, just I got to throw in an ad for us a little bit. I'm very proud, and we're excited about a lot. It's been a good year for Energy Northwest. Our last fiscal year, Columbia Generating Station set another record when you include dispatching. We will dispatch that, by the way. That's one of the things about nuclear that we like, is that you can integrate it with renewables. You can move the plant, and the newer models become even better equipped to do that. But with Columbia, we will integrate with the renewables. So in the spring, when the water's running heavy and we have more electricity, Bonneville, really than you need, and prices actually go negative, incredibly enough, that you'd have to pay to get rid of it. We were able to back down at that point and back down in the plant, and then bring it back later when the water starts to go down, the wind's not blowing, it's hotter out, then we bring Columbia back. We get credit for that. With that credit, we went over 10 million megawatt hours our last fiscal year. That's a record for us. The first time we broke the 10 million barrier. Columbia Generating Station, over the last 10 years, every 2-year cycle, we monitor over a 2-year cycle, because you refuel once every 2 years. Every 2-year cycle, the cost of our power has gone down, the amount of our generation has gone up for the last 10 years. So we're very proud of what the team at Columbia has accomplished from that perspective. And then if you look at the advancement, as I talked about, adding the hydro plants to the mix, and then really to cap it off, last week, the Department of Energy announced 2 companies that received awards, if you will, for building the next generation nuclear in this country. And both of the companies that received the award were partnered with us at Energy Northwest. So that was, number one, it was a little shocking at first, because we were hoping to get just one as we went into it. There's 2 available. Basically, in the spring, the DOE announced that they were going to have 2 sets of matching funds, up to $4 billion, matching, 50-50 matching, up to $4 billion to award to companies with new next generation design nuclear plants. And with the idea that those plants would have to go online in the next 7 years. So we were approached by multiple companies, frankly, across the country, who wanted to partner with us, because quite honestly, with the legislation, the seat of legislation we have in the Northwest, with a legislation here and a governor that believes nuclear power needs to be part of the solution. If you remember, when Governor Inslee was in the presidential race for a while, he talked about climate, and he said nuclear needs to be part of the solution. So we got a political climate. And let's face it, we're the birthplace. We're the birthplace here. And at Energy Northwest, I have 2 sites that were licensed for nuclear plants back in the 70s as part of that initial buildup that never got built. Right, so I have 2 sites available that have already been licensed previously by the NRC. I've got transmission here. I've got water with the Columbia River with an intake structure that was built for the site. So we have a whole bunch of things in our favor that made us very attractive to every company in the country that wants to get their new design built. In the end, we ended up choosing 2 to partner with, thinking that out of that, we'll be lucky if we can, win one of these bids. And so we ended up partnering with Terrapower, certainly Bill Gates' company, located in Seattle. And we're partners with them. Along within that partnership, there's GE Hitachi, PacifiCorp, and Duke Energy. And then we also partnered with a company called X Energy, who is located in Maryland. Thinking, okay, we've got 2 opportunities here. And when we found out about a week ago before the announcement, I got some calls from DC that the rumors were we were going to get both. At first, I was kind of stunned. It's it's kind of like, well, now what? But I'll tell you this: after processing that, here's what we came down with. What an incredible, lucky opportunity for us at Energy Northwest. We are in an amazing position. We're extremely excited about this, and I got a chance to talk to Secretary Menzies last week. We talked a little bit about this after the announcement was made on Tuesday. Him and I met on Wednesday and spoke quite a bit. And I'll tell you, he was very clear about the fact that, once again, the situation in the Northwest right now is one of the deciding factors they use when looking at where do we, how do we choose the winners here? Where's the best place and most likely to get built? And all the things I talked to you about that we were thinking relative to the need, the political climate, DOE property in a area that people embrace being the pioneers in this technology. All those things went in their consideration as far as wanting to see this get done. So we're incredibly excited about the future. So anyhow, that was announced last week, and we are going full bore with our partners, starting to work on. I can tell you the first couple of years of this, Karl, is going to be a lot of work with the design owners, because now we got to finish the design. They got to get their design licensed by the NRC. In the meanwhile, we've got to go back and relicense the 2 sites here that were previously licensed. And we think that'll be a shorter path because they've been licensed previously. And we've kept up all the caricature of this area because of Columbia, right? So when seismic requirements change and flooding requirements change, we've already done that for the entire site because of Columbia. So all those things, that work has been completed. But still, there's a couple of years here where people need to understand that there's a couple of years of getting design and licensing done before we ever turn a shovel. We got a ton of support from the Tri-Cities. I got people who want to go turn the shovel next week, Karl, as would we, but there's work to be done yet before we get to that.
No, for sure. And Brad, I just got to compliment you and your team on putting this together, because it really is a huge win, not just for the Tri-Cities, but I think the state of Washington, and to your point, for the whole Northwest. And so many of these drivers probably led up to this decision, but from the economic development and the TriDeck perspective, where we've always had this partnership with Energy Northwest, we're excited to start to meet these companies that you'll be bringing in and working with. Try to sell them on a region, like as they go forward. Maybe you can talk a little bit about this, but the whole concept behind, and maybe that's our next topic. Can you talk a little bit about, traditional nuclear reactor design and construction and size and scale versus this concept of small modular? Because I think one of the exciting things for us is that, small modular could have a lot of its components built in factories and stuff. And so, we're excited to work with you guys and the new companies to say, hey, we'd be a great spot for some of your supply chain and some of your manufacturing, and being able to ship out on the river and all these things we want to sell them on. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the economic potential, the potential economic benefit here in the Tri-City area, we're very excited about. I'll just give you a small example starting right out front. As I said, the next couple of years are going to be a lot of design work, paperwork type stuff, but we've moved. We had an office building that was pretty much been sitting empty for a long time. It was referred to as CDC, and we moved our Energy Services Development Group, who are the ones who generate our new projects and are the ones who are involved in making the submittal. We moved this into that office space. As you know, obviously, Terrapower is already located in Washington State over in Seattle. They got a footprint there. But X Energy, the Maryland company, is already making plans to take half that office space, get their people out here on the ground in Richland and start, right here, opening up an office. And by the way, I got to announce this as part of our forum yesterday. We recognized Sid Morrison. If anyone who's on this who's been a Washingtonian their whole lives knows who Sid is. Sid was a longtime congressman, state senator, congressman, head of the Department of Transportation, amongst 100 other things that he's done. And he's going to be retiring off our board as a chairman after 20 years next spring. And to recognize him, we thought, what better way to recognize him than to take something that's called the CDC that, frankly, we all keep forgetting what that even stands for. And it's going to be officially named. We changed the name yesterday. It's going to be the Morrison Energy Center. The Morrison Energy Center is going to headquarter our future operations, if you will, for getting these new nuclear plants built here in Washington State. But that office already has got space. We're going to, our partners are going to be using that space. So we're going to see immediate economic benefit in the footprint here in Richland. To your point, as we pursue and work our way through this and get to the conclusion of actually building one of these, we will be looking for every opportunity, working with these companies as to what can be located and based right here. Because frankly, once we get started on this, I mentioned earlier, like 8 gigawatts. 8 gigawatts is like 8 Columbia plants. That'd be like 16 of one of these small modular reactors. So if we are actually going to honestly take on and fill this delta that's going to go away through carbon, and by the way, that 8 gigawatts assumes we also build out more renewables. That's not just saying everything's replaced. It's saying it's replaced by a reasonable amount of renewables along with nuclear. There's plenty of opportunity here in the Northwest. My hope is the first one we build is just that. It's the first one to get it up, to demonstrate its capability, and then go from there. Now, what do these look like? They're going to look entirely different than what you're used to seeing when you go by some place like Columbia, where you see all the large buildings and the cooling towers and all that. The footprint is significantly smaller, okay? The footprint is significantly smaller. And frankly, the operation of them, you know, as much as I believe, and I do believe, and I can assure you our existing fleet is safe. Whenever people ask me about, you know, my thoughts on the safety, here's what I tell them. I told you I'm from Monticello. I was a reactor operator, so I was a trained reactor operator. Senior reactor operator means you manage and supervise people who run the reactor. I was plant manager at Monticello. And as I tell people, my wife Kim and I raised our 4 children within 1 mile as the crow flies from Monticello nuclear plants. I tell people, do you think I believe in the safety? That's all you need to know right there. So anyhow, we are, but these go to a whole nother level because they're run at a very, very low pressure. They really work on the concept with the Terrapower. It's called the natrium reactor. So it's sodium, which has a very, very high boiling point. So you can heat it up extremely high at a very low pressure. And you're really taking advantage of the heat of the liquid sodium to draw your energy. X Energy similarly actually uses they end up using a helium gas. So again, you get this high heat at a very low reactor power. You don't have the type of powers we're using now. And in both cases, you're really looking at reactors that are frankly melt down. You can't melt them down, okay, because they run at a very low power. The temperature and the medium you use to move that temperature is where you really draw your energy from. So because of that, the types of things you see now with, you know, 10-mile emergency zone radiuses that are required with our existing plants, the security footprints you see, those start to come down in size. And as a matter of fact, the NRC currently looking at the new scale version has really got down to where there is no emergency zone. It's really just at the fence around the plant because the safety level is so high, and these new next generations are in the same place. So that footprint, the amount of people you need to support it, the plant you need to support it, all become much smaller, and that's where you start deriving, if you will, the potential cost savings that come with those. Now, in our case, after last week, and you say, and oh, by the way, the federal government's going to pay up to 50% of that cost, and now you really start saying we can make the economics really work on this.
Oh, that's perfect, Brad. That you know, that answers a lot of questions, because I think it's good for everybody here. And obviously, when we get into technical details, there's a lot of just awareness and education that can help that. But you know, this is such a huge opportunity for the whole nuclear field, right? And I think it's great to have your perspective from that plant operations point of view, and, you know, moving through those phases from an operational point of view. I guess it's yet to be seen, but you just talked about, you know, the efficiencies and the power output increases that you've had at Columbia. And obviously that comes through time and your operational standards and different things that you guys are doing internally to drive those outcomes. But do you think on a smaller scale with these SMRs that they'll be kind of more, you know, it just runs at a steady rate, or will there be, you know, over time increases in efficiency and standards in that?
Well, I think, well, you know, anytime once you get into actually a practical use, if you will, I'm sure there are things that you can learn and improve from there. But you know, I believe they're going to be very efficient, very effective right out of the chute. And part of the beauty with them is, as I said, we will move Columbia to integrate it with renewables, but they won't really built for that as well. You can do it, okay. These new plants, because of how they're built and the fact and modulars and that, are in a much better position to be integrated, if you will, with renewables. To take, hey, I'll use the X Energy as an example. 4 different plants, basically with 4 different turbines. All right, 80 megawatts each. So on any given day, if the wind's blowing or there's a ton of hydro out there, you just take 2 of them offline for a while, and then you start them up again later when you need them. And then they're going to be designed. It's interesting. When I was actually got a chance to see the X Energy control room recently, and so again, I was an operator, and if you've ever seen pictures of an existing nuclear plant control room, there are switches or gauges.
Yeah.
It's a huge room with switches and gauges everywhere. And if you walk into it doesn't matter if it's a new scale, X Energy, Terrapower, one of the new models. So there's 4 units with X Energy. That means there's 4 computer screens like you're sitting in front of it with a mouse in front of them, and that's how you operate the plant. They just they let me actually out as an ex-operator. They let me operate. It was really just find the power and click plus or minus if I wanted to run the plant up or down. It's incredible compared to how I grew up as an operator. So it's taking into account all those new technologies that makes it easier to operate. The design is more just inherently safe, and the integration with renewables just becomes easier because of that. So, which is going to be very important.
No, and thanks for that description of it, because I think that makes a lot of sense. To your point earlier about, how many more renewables would we have to build, and how much transmission infrastructure would we have to do that, and what's that cost overall? Not just the cost of the generation, but then the total cost to integrate it into the grid. Mm-hmm. And then, as you say, that with the new small modular plants, that they're better able to be operated and turned on and off and up and down to load match what's coming in from renewables that you can't predict, right? And that's ultimately what we want. We all want to turn the light switch on and it comes on. We want the heater to turn on, the air conditioning. That's what we want, right?
Well, it's interesting you say. I talked to my team yesterday about that. Actually, the DOE, we got a very nice a letter from them thanking us for the people, our essential workers during this COVID, right? All the people who operate our plants, our hydros, our nuclear plant, our essential workers. There's no staying at home. We got to keep the electricity going. And to your point, last spring when we got into COVID, I was watching one of the evening shows where a bunch of celebrities were thanking essential workers, and they started absolutely rightfully so with the medical people, the people who deserve it the most, the people who are on the front line, absolutely. And they got to all these other people, everyone who deserved it. But as I was watching, I thought it was interesting. They never mentioned the people who run the power plants and keep the lights on. And as I told my team, I said, I think what it is a testimony to the work you do, because we don't even think it's, we don't even think about it. You just assume I walk over, I hit the switch and everything works. It's just a given that I don't even stop to think that actually what goes into that it's not a given, but we've become used to that, if you will. Right now, frankly, if you take a look, I'll just be honest, you take a look down in California, and what concerns me here in Washington State is as we phase out this carbon, if we're not thinking to the future now, Karl, if we're not thinking about how we're going to manage this, quite honestly, you get what you have down in California. And, I know they've tried to recently discuss, well, some of this is the fire related, it was, but before the fire started, they were rolling brownouts because they did not have enough generation to meet their needs, because they have phased out the carbon, and they've done it without thinking about how we're going to replace it. Well, they're all in on renewables, but as I said earlier, you can't depend on those every day. And California can do what they want, by the way, but they're scheduled to take 2,000 megawatts of nuclear at Diablo Canyon out of the mix in about 2 or 3 years. And every day I keep waiting for them to wake up and say, wait a minute, that's carbon-free 2,000 megawatts. We're already short megawatts. But instead, what I saw last week, what happens is they took the restrictions off their carbon generation because they needed electricity so bad that they said, go ahead, you can exceed all of our limits we put in place. In Washington State, we want to be in a place where we pass a legislation and we take action that actually can be implemented as we intend it to be. In 10 years from now, we're not saying, well, that was a great idea, but unfortunately, we didn't prepare for it, and now we can't execute. So that's our goal at Energy Northwest, is saying, how can we be part of the solution to make sure we can actually execute this legislation as it's written, because we believe in it from the environmental standpoint.
That's a great point. Well, so with these two companies and the the DOE announcement and the Advanced Reactor Design Program, Brad, how does Energy Northwest factor into that? So like, will you talked about working with them now and bringing them to town, working on the design and the licensing and permitting and stuff, but then will Energy Northwest own the reactors, or will you work on, selling the power into your network, or
Yeah.
how does that work in the future?
So that's a great question. That's a great question, Karl. Thank you. So it's kind of two different situations with our partners. Okay, with both, we're providing expertise up front and services to help with the design piece and potential licensing. And also, so I told you before, we have two sites. X Energy is looked at site number 1, the didn't get finished. Terrapower site number 4. So we have two sites that they're both interested in building on. Then there's becomes a little bit of a difference, if you will. With Terrapower, as I noted earlier, we're also teamed, and they're teamed with Pacific Core, independent sales of electricity. And they've got a couple of areas they're looking at. They're going to be responsible right now, as it looks like on paper. Pacific Core would actually own the plant, and they would take all the offtake from it. And they've got members in Rocky Mountain area, East Idaho. There's some areas in the Northwest. I'm not sure where that power is going to go exactly, but they would actually own it, and they would do the offtake. We would provide a site, and we would look to operate and maintain that, okay, with Terrapower. X Energy is a different situation in the fact that really they are looking to partner with us to find offtake through our members as a joint action agency. As I said, I've got 27 members to look for those people who are saying, hey, as we phase out some of this carbon, I'm going to need a new source of electricity. I'd be interested in buying in on that plant. And in that particular one, potentially Energy Northwest would build that plant, operate and maintain it. X Energy would design it, get it licensed. We would build it, we would maintain it and own it and sell it to our members. Or frankly, we actually have a member or two right now who see that need very strong and are actually interested in saying, you know what, maybe I'd rather just own it and put it on your site and you can operate and maintain it for me, but I'm the owner and I decide what to do with that electricity. So those things are all things we're in the process of fleshing out as this takes place. So there are some significant differences in how the partnerships are going to work, but we're excited about our opportunity to support both.
Oh, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. The other thing that you guys talked a little bit about yesterday, and I think it it really matches this theme of carbon-free future and moving towards a CETA standard, and doing that is this transportation component in carbon production, and that's not a part of the CETA standard, but we all know and we see, and I mean we read it in the paper every day, right? Like GM, Ford, the big three are going more into electric vehicles than they ever have, and it's pretty clear that there's a timeline in internal combustion engines that we're not going to be there forever. So as you bring on more electric vehicles, what does that do to the power demands?
Well, you're right. So part of this equation, as you look to the future and you ask yourself, how much are we going to need, is trying to guess, if you will, how much more we're going to decarbonize the entire system in the country and in transportation in particular, as you pointed out. So there's got to be some sort of rough estimate, because as you say, that gap we see right now is only going to be larger potentially based on what's going on with the electric vehicle situation. So we only see it's only going to, if you will, emphasize the need for more generation. And right now you're trying to put a guess on it, but yes, it's going to drive the need, and it's going to only make the gap that much greater as you retire the carbon. And I'm glad you brought that up, by the way. Another thing I'm proud of with our company is that we've partnered with a number of our members, again, to build charging stations out here across the east side of the state. Our goal was to get people to be able to feel like they can leave Seattle and not have to, have anxiety about where am I going to get my vehicle charged once I get to the east side. So we've been involved in 9 different charging stations. I have one of our own. We're looking for more opportunity to make that happen. As I said before, we're trying to increase our carbon-free footprint everywhere we can. One other item, I think I've talked a lot about our generating. We're also involved in demand response, right? Looking for opportunities to be able to demand response is a case where you partner with people and there's some economic benefit to them if they're able to shed their loads at the times when the demands for electricity are at their highest, and then pick it up later off peak, and they get an economic benefit from doing that. So we've got our fingers in virtually everything that's out there relative to helping decarbonize. So the electric vehicle piece, as you pointed out, Karl, is going to be a big piece of this. Certainly when we did our studies, there's some estimates that go into that as to how much that portion will be, but we're all trying to predict the future on that one. But it would seem easy to say it's only going to become a bigger part of the market, right? Looking forward. Yeah.
No, and that's a great point, Brad, because even though I'm really new here, and like I've said before, I'm going to keep on calling myself the new guy until somebody says, like, you've been here long enough, you can't do it. But back in March, I think it was, or maybe February, we were part of a discussion where from all our local utility districts and brought in BPA, because just even here locally in the Tri-Cities, we see an increase in electricity demand coming up. And I know, as we're out attracting companies, obviously energy is one of our main focuses. And that's why it's such a great partnership we got with Energy Northwest. But we've missed out on some opportunities to even talk to battery manufacturers, because we need, battery manufacturing obviously is a really heavy electrical load for that manufacturing process. And we didn't have enough capacity to be able to meet some of those demands. And so, it's part of this interrelationship, like you say, we're all trying to predict the future, like how much electricity do we need? Mm-hmm. We know it's going to go up. And as we take that, carbon generating potential out of the mix, how do we get there? And it's, again, that's you guys here, because that's so much of what you're involved in and across the spectrum.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and the dynamics here in the Northwest relative to the public power and Bonneville and how everyone works together. I've told people I've been here 10 years. If I stay 10 more, I might finally start to understand all the interconnections, if you will. Right. We've got the Northwest Public Power Association. We've got the Northwest Public Power Conservation. We've got Public Power Council. We've got Washington Public Utility District. And it's a long, rich history of public power here in the North. When I got out here, first thing I did was try to study at least a little bit of the history, and maybe people are familiar, but ultimately Bonneville's here because back in the 30s, the federal government wanted people to get out of the Dust Bowl. There was all the water and green up here in the Northwest, and nobody lived here because there was no infrastructure. So they thought if we help build the infrastructure with the federal system, we'll get people to move up there. So, and when I went back and studied that, so that's where that came about. And then public utilities, Bonneville ran it out to the county or the city and stopped there, and then the local district had to come up with it. So our plant, by the way, Columbia sells all of its power to Bonneville. We have no transmission at Energy North, which is different. Where I come from, Excel Energy in Minnesota, we were a transmission and generation company. You did both. Here we sell everything to Bonneville. Now the unique piece will be, if we build this next generation piece, we will be then starting to go directly to our customer, right? Bonneville right now is not interested in being in the middle of that or taking any of that load. We would actually align with our customers and go directly to them with that electricity and frankly have to use their transmission to wield that electricity. But I have heard that conversation about it. We're getting a little choked up in the Tri-Cities and need the ability to get more in there. Since we're not in the transmission business, I don't spend as much time looking at that and understand all the nuances of it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, and I think, really it's just that interconnect. And that's what, most people don't understand is how does transmission and those, relationships that you're talking about, really affect those things, like how much power do we have available? And to your point, from a layperson's point of view, we really just want that. We turn on the power and it comes on, and it's everything behind the scenes that you guys are.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, that's all we care about. Hit the switch, it's on. That's it. Everything's fine. Life is good.
That's right. Well, we talked, about the relationship that the Tridec has with Energy Northwest, and like I said, it's from our point of view, it's really a great relationship. It's so amazing having you guys here. All the potential coming up with the ARDP is really huge. But one thing I wanted to maybe ask you about is there are 300 acres that Energy Northwest owns that was basically it was Department of Energy surplus property that Tridec's the local agency that's able to accept surplus property. And so we did that, and then worked out a deal with Energy Northwest now that has been I think focused on some solar generating in the future. And you want to talk a little bit about that, Brad, and just kind
Well,
of.
yeah, we're in talks with Tusi, who I mentioned earlier, because they're the ones who do the solar panels for our Horn Rapids solar project. So Tusi is talking to us, since we got that 300 acres, about renting that from us. Frankly, we're setting up a lease agreement where they're interested in potentially, and again, we're early on in the conversation, but up to maybe another 100 megawatts electric to solar. They're building it on those 300 acres. So, that's something in the works. As I told you when we started out this discussion, we're looking for every opportunity to be partnered with anyone that has solutions for addressing the new legislation and environment and the carbon piece. So we're kind of excited about this, just getting that property and already into these conversations with them about the potential for, like I said, obviously 100 megawatts electric solar is a very significant solar plant if that takes place. So we're excited to be entered into those conversations right now.
Oh, that's great. We do have a question from our viewers about Apple, and it's APEL. And I got to say, again, because I'm the new guy, this will be new for me. So can you talk a little bit about Apple and what is it? I know, when I've come out for meetings at Energy Northwest, I drive by the building that says Apple inside, but what is Apple?
Apple is an area where, frankly, is that we rent to other companies and that to do their business. And quite honestly, there's a lot of, I will say, I like to think about a think tank type work going on there and stuff, and small labs in different areas like that. P&L has some involvement with us there. We rent that out to local businesses who need an area, and I will describe it as there's a whole variety of things that go on when I toured there. The first time I was really, really impressed by it, but it's multiple things that go on in there from a laboratory perspective, from chemistry perspective to engineering. There's some radiological nuclides for medical purposes that are in there. So a whole bunch of interesting things that a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me are working on in there, Karl. So yeah, that's what it's set up for. There's lots of opportunities, basically, for efficient, effective business startup and development, and there's a whole variety of them that are in there.
Well, that's great. I mean, obviously when we talk about job creation, which is really our goal in economic development, it's great to have that. And then of course the proximity, which is what you're talking about, has a huge bearing on it. And I think even, talking about yourself and growing up in Monticello, and then how you came into the nuclear field was a great story, because, I think in anybody's life, or, even with economic development, it's about proximity. The fact that Energy Northwest is here gives us a chance to work with these other companies, to use a facility like Apple to help build those future companies and future jobs. And it's really about, where you're located.
To that end, the other thing I'm really proud of, Karl, actually, I didn't mention is, we are also partnered with the Columbia Basin College. We're doing work with them. We provide training programs that are working hand in hand with Columbia Basin College for potential new nuclear workers, from INC, radiological, operational people, to give local people a chance and young people to get into those courses and prepare themselves to come work. If not at Columbia, there's opportunities all across the country for that work, and a lot of it fits in out at Hanford also for them as an opportunity once they get that training. So a number of our people help provide that instruction. We're very proud of that. Actually, with WSU, recently we've entered into more detailed discussions there too, as far as they're very interested in how can we partner, what can they do for us in the future to ensure that they're helping getting us a workforce that's available. And these conversations were all taking place, frankly, a month ago. It only becomes even more important and more exciting in lieu of the news that just came out last week from the Department of Energy. So, and I want to circle back also on the significance of that announcement again, so everyone understands it, because we do here at Columbia or Energy Northwest, and that is, for everyone here in the local area, what this means, that announcement from the DOE last week, that they put $8 billion, up to $8 billion in matching funds, all in the basket of Energy Northwest here in the Tri-Cities. If we stop and think about that, as I told our people, is really exciting, and it should be very sobering to all of us, because frankly, as a Nuclear Energy Institute, Maria Korzek, the CEO, said to me last week, "It's exciting, Brad, but you guys are basically carrying the burden of next generation nuclear on your shoulders here in the Tri-City area." So I know we're going to get this. I know everybody around us wants to support, and we're excited. That's what makes the opportunity so great, is people like yourselves at the Tri-City Development Council, Karl, and your team, and I know it's all in. The local businesses are all in as to what can they do to help and support. And that's great, because we're going to need all of that. We're going to need all of that. We have a heavy task in front of us, and a lot of people are counting on us across this country to rejuvenate the nuclear industry. We're tired. The DOE's tired. We're tired of watching other countries such as China and Russia develop new technology and take that out, and look to countries that are underdeveloped and offer those opportunities to support them and get their foot in the door, frankly, when here as the inventors, if you will, of the technology, and right here in particular in the Tri-Cities, we watched that go on. It's time for us to get back in the game, and we're going to carry that responsibility here in the Tri-Cities. So exciting, and we all should understand the seriousness of that responsibility.
Brad, that's a great way to frame it, and you're exactly right. You know, from the business organization, I think business perspective and community perspective, you know, we're ready to pitch in and help out. And so we look forward to identifying ways that specifically, I know, you know, we're looking forward to meeting some of the executive team from X Energy that's coming out the next couple of weeks and start to have those dialogues with them. But, you know, we want to make sure that they know that the community is behind this and supportive. And to your point, it's great to get that feedback from DOE that's why they selected these two proposals that both involve Energy Northwest. I mean, they're really setting us up to be the center of new nuclear development, right? Like,
yeah, it is to quote the band song, to put the weight right on us, Karl. So we got it now. This is ours to shoulder. But I'll tell you what, to your point, and your people have tried that months ago. Okay, Brad, send us. Where do we need to go? Where do we need to go? Start that. And at that time, I'd say, I love your enthusiasm. I love your, just be patient a minute. We actually got to be able to understand where it is we're headed, which way we're running, what we're running with. Now we know. Now we know very clearly the path forward has been set for us. People, you know, local companies, PNNL, anything to go, Bill Lamson, and I know all in, anything they can do to help. And we're excited about this opportunity. And there's no place in the country that would get greater support from the local community and businesses than we're going to get here at Energy Northwest. And that's one of the reasons we're excited and optimistic about it. And like I say, now we know what the path forward is like. So as we say, let's to you and your team, unleash the hounds, Karl. We're ready.
That sounds great. Well, we're going to cut off before 10 to get you your next meeting, Brad, but we got about 6 minutes. So I will go back and ask you one question about the Terrapower project. And we didn't get a chance to talk about the storage component of that. And you know, just as a new design technology, you talked about the molten salt a little bit, but we go down into that storage capability, especially as it relates to matching. And then I think what was cool, because we had a presentation last week at a meeting from one of the Terrapower guys, and they showed, because of that storage, you can combine other heat sources, like, you know, concentrating solar or something, you know, could be.
It's exactly right. Yeah. The storage system, if you will, almost acts like a type of battery if in the storage. And it's an incredibly interesting concept, because the Terrapower concept, essentially you'd have the reactor and a very small footprint, and it's similar to a current pressurized water reactor design. In other words, where the heat from the reactor heats up a separate salt, if you will, mixture. And again, as I mentioned earlier, because of that sodium mixture can go to such an extreme high temperature without boiling, you can put a lot of energy in that. And then the idea is you send that off somewhere a ways away from the reactor. So now all the secondary side things where turbines will be to use that heat, storage with tanks that can hold that with all that heat in it and use it when you need it, they're off away from the reactor. So the footprint that you're licensing with the NRC becomes very small and very limited on the amount of the equipment that they actually are involved in. So right now, if you use an old design like Columbia Generating Station, all the turbine building, all the secondary side stuff that's the exact same as a coal plant has, still comes under the jurisdiction of the NRC, because it's all sited here together at the same spot. So you have all the same regulatory requirements, when really the equipment you're running isn't any different than the coal plants running next door.
Yeah.
This eliminates that. This takes all that piece away from there. So it really brings the scope down as to what is under the purview of the NRC and the licensing to just a reactor. And then you take all that extra, I'll use the term superheated sodium, and send that off somewhere where you can store that and then keep that heat and use it when you need it. And you can use it for multiple things. You know, as you said, it's not just driving a turbine. You can use it for heating, build it. There's all types of things you could do once you get that and send it off site. So it really is, to your point, a very, very interesting design. Very interesting.
Well, maybe to your earlier point about the placing of these small modular reactors, because it is such a smaller footprint, and if you're only licensing, you know, and kind of creating that safety barrier around just the reactor port, and then you can have your power generation over here, cogeneration, like you talked about, you know, which is used so many times in coal-fired or like biomass, right? Like there's a biomass plant up in Kettle Falls. They don't use cogeneration, but it's something that you can use it for.
Right.
Sawmills use it to draw lumber, and you know, there's these other heating uses that opens up. It just seems like a really cool concept.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. There's a lot of smart people working on these things, Karl. Come up with some incredibly interesting designs. Yep.
Great point too that you made earlier, the connection with PNNL, you know, the future development, and then being able to tap into that here in the Tri-Cities.
Having a resource like that right here in town we're incredibly fortunate. Yeah, incredibly fortunate.
Well, Brad, we're down to 3 minutes. You know, we can wrap up a little bit early, but do you want to kind of give your closing remarks? And I just want to go out and start by thanking you for your time today. I know you got a really full schedule, especially with, you know, the forum yesterday, and then all the stuff around ARDP that's going on. So we appreciate you taking an hour to talk with us today. This has been really great. And on behalf of TriDeck, I'd just like, and the Tri-Cities, thank you, you know, for your partnership with Energy Northwest. You guys are great partners. We can't be more excited for the future of ARDP and what's coming up with all your projects that you talked about today.
Well, Karl, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this. It was a great conversation. I always enjoy getting the opportunity to talk about what the people do here at Energy Northwest. I'm very proud of our team. One thing before I go, again, I can't emphasize enough. I want to recognize all of the people in Energy Northwest, all of our essential workers who during this COVID timeframe, as I said, many of us were able to shelter and work from home and that, having to come into our generating plants every day and continue to do the work necessary to keep the lights on for all of us in the area. I'm extremely proud of them, and they were dedicated, and they've been dedicated, and I'm very proud of them. And frankly, for all my non-essential workers too, who all found a way to continue to contribute, and they work hard to continue to contribute in any way they possibly can given these trying times. So first of all, I want to make sure I recognize all of them and thank them for everything they've done for our success at Energy Northwest. Tell you that I'm looking forward to our partnerships continuing, Karl. It's exciting times for us. As I said, we are carrying the future once again of nuclear here in the Northwest, and specifically here in the Tri-City area. And it's as I say, it's our history, it's our birthright. I'm excited about it. I'm excited that we will be continuing on what started generations ago out here, and to make things a better world, frankly, just as it was then. The intent now to make things a better world, fix the environment, fix the climate. So that's all I have, sir. Thank you very much.
Brad, thank you. That was so well said, and a great way to end our discussion today. But thanks again for your time. Look forward to partnering with you. And thanks everybody for joining us on Coffee with Karl. We'll see you next week.
Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.